The Trump administration is formally denying state investigators access to evidence from the FBI's investigation into the killing of Alex Preddy. The move comes after White House border czar Tom Homan recently announced the end of the surge of federal agents in Minneapolis, while also pledging to improve cooperation with city and state officials. 37-year-old Preddy was an ICU nurse. He was fatally shot by federal agents in Minneapolis last month in broad daylight, and many would describe as an execution-style killing. The FBI noted the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension last week that it would not share evidence from its investigation with the state. Additionally, the FBI said it would not share materials from the killings of Renee Good on January 7th or the shooting of Julio Sosa Solis on January 14th. In response, Democratic Governor Tim Walz stressed the need for impartial investigations, stating, quote, Trump's left hand cannot investigate his right hand. And Joe, given the fact that in two of these killings, at least, Kristi Noem immediately labeled these victims domestic terrorists. In one case, Stephen Miller called Alex Preddy a would-be assassin. This seems even more brazenly corrupt, with the appearance of zero interest in accountability. Zero. Absolutely none.
Frank Foer, the feds came in and these renegade agency heads who have been lying through their teeth from the very beginning have these agents who behaved like thugs, behaved improperly. And that, of course, we heard that actually at a Senate hearing earlier this week from people in the department themselves, that they acted in an extraordinarily unprofessional way, but they come to Minnesota, they shoot and kill at point blank range 2 American citizens, 2 Minnesota residents. And the administration is not allowing the state of Minnesota to investigate the killings. Some would say they both were ruled homicides. The homicides of 2 Minnesota residents. I've never heard anything like this before in my life.
I mean, remember, this is a hastily gathered force that's been erected by this administration almost overnight, that's been deployed in service of squashing kind of an emergency that's been way overhyped. And they were told, ICE was told by the Vice President of the United States, by the administration, that they had immunity. And then we saw the consequences of what happened when they had this sense of immunity. We saw the way in which they terrorized populations in Minnesota, the way that they went to war with civilians who were activists, who were just trying to bring some measure of accountability to them. And now we have this shutdown that's happening over the department, with the aim of Democrats trying to impose some reforms on the Department of Homeland Security that make them as accountable as the rest of American law enforcement. But all of these accountability measures are kind of empty without the possibility that when rogue agents go off and do terrible things, or in this case, they might not even be rogue agents, when the agents go off and do terrible things to innocent people, that there should be some accountability for those agents. And now, you know, we're seeing that whatever promises that the administration makes about reform are completely hollow.
Yeah, and Rev, this administration likes to say it's the most transparent in history. Well, here's a chance to be transparent, and they're doing just the opposite. The Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, which is the organization inside Minnesota that would handle this, has said this is unprecedented. That you have federal agents killing one of their citizens in the state, that it would not even be a question about sharing evidence. That's how the investigation works. And they're saying inside state officials that this is hampering their own investigation because the FBI is holding so much of the evidence that they can't actually get. They think they know what happened. They've seen the videos, but they don't have all the evidence they need to bring it to trial. So this is clearly the federal government saying we have something to hide here. Therefore, we're not going to share all of our evidence with the state.
Unquestionably, it certainly appears that they're hiding something. Because why would you interfere with a process that has never been interfered with? That the mutual cooperation helps an investigation. And the fact of the matter is that to break the norm in the first place, but then not to share, raises all kinds of suspicions while you're talking about being transparent. This is an absolute smack in the face of justice.
Yeah, and let's back up. They lost credibility, Joe, from the very beginning of both shootings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy. They first appeared to, and reporting shows, defamed the victim, completely defamed the victim's name, blamed the killing on the victim, had people on the far right echoing that, saying they brought it on themselves. The video, and most normal people who have logic, shows that's not what happened. So they defamed the victim, lied about it, and then denied. Defame, lied, denied the investigation to the state. You would think in a situation like this, if you wanted to create transparency, you would give the investigation back to the state where it should be to show that you are interested in true accountability. That is not what they're interested in here. And Minnesota, the state of Minnesota, once again is getting stepped on by this administration so they can continue with their rampage across the state, which I don't believe is over.
Well, they don't appear to be interested in transparency because they're not interested in transparency. Kristi Noem has been lying from the very beginning. When Renee Good was trying to peacefully leave, she got shot through her side window, through her brain. It went in one side and out the other. I believe the examiner determined that to be a homicide. The same with Alex Preddy, who, again, many people say it looks like he was shot execution style. But Mika, we have seen with our eyes what happened. There's video out there, and I am quite certain the state of Minnesota and other states and cities, jurisdictions have brought cases against people with less evidence than we've already seen right now. I think the state of Minnesota, if they believe there are charges, they need the information that they have, and they have a lot of information. They have a lot of eyewitnesses. They have a lot of video. I think they need to go ahead and bring the charges and then go to a judge and have the judge, through the discovery process, make the feds give up the evidence that they have, because they do not have a legitimate cause that will stand up in court for covering up these two killings. In fact, that's really the only justification. They're going to have to go in front of a Minnesota judge and say, Your Honor, we at this time cannot turn the evidence of these two killings over to the state because we, the federal government, are actively involved in a cover-up of their killings. That's really all they've got. So I think it's incumbent on the state of Minnesota to take all the evidence, all the eyewitnesses, all the video, all the angles, bring these charges, whatever charges they deem appropriate, and then get into the discovery process and make the federal government give up that information that they have no legitimate reason to hold on to.
No statute of limitations on murder. Reverend Al Sharpton.
And again, Mika, I just have to say, and I do say this to ICE agents who are out there who aren't sure what they got themselves into, that at times are overwhelmed out there and are seeing what's going on all around them. It's important for them to understand there is a statute of limitations that lasts forever on some crimes. And the President of the United States cannot pardon you for crimes that are brought against you by the state of Minnesota or any other state. I think it's important to realize what I've been saying all along. There are people inside of administrations, and I talked about this yesterday in the newsletter, that think they were the first people to ever get in the White House and they're going to be there forever. That's just not the case. As Clark Clifford once said, of the Kennedy administration after Vietnam and everything. He said they acted as if history started when they walked into the White House. Well, you could say that about just about every administration you and I have seen. I say the same thing for these ICE agents who think that what's happening today, what's happening this month is forever. It is not. It is not. And if you do something that leads to serious injury or the death of somebody, justice will be served. And there is no one who can pardon you for crimes committed in the state of Minnesota or California or Georgia or South Carolina or any other state.
It's a great point to reframe. Reverend Al Sharpton, thank you so much. We'll see you again at the top of the next hour.